Hey beautiful people, this video is about what's included in a project execution plan. In the previous video we talked about what are the 5 stages of project execution. This one focuses more specifically on the plan. Good project execution plan is your playbook for the project. And like any great playbook, if you leave out a couple of pages, you're going to put the game at serious risk. Hi, my name is Jennifer Kenny. I am the best-selling author of The Innovation Mindset and the award-winning 100% Capacity. I help leaders deliver outcomes that match their promises. And today we're going to cover exactly what that means when it comes to a project execution plan so that you can avoid some of your blind spots. The purpose of an execution plan, and I don't mean a plan for the whole project, I mean just for the execution part of it that we defined in the other video, is that it aligns the team and the stakeholders, or the internal customers and stakeholders. And it also serves as a baseline for monitoring. So I talk quite a lot about metrics and standards, and one of the most important things when you embark on a project is that you have some level of baseline that you can understand the value impact that the project is going to produce for your customer. So how are they going to know when the project is successful? What metrics are you going to move the needle on with this project? What value are you going to be able to create for another department, for your company, for the company's product lines in a way that allows you to be able to measure that value? I do a lot of work with project leads on being able to claim success. And without a baseline, it's going to be incredibly difficult for you to be able to claim success. So when you think about your purpose of your plan, the purpose of your plan is also to be able to understand what are the metrics that you are going to measure yourself and your project against. And I don't mean internally within the project, I mean externally as it relates to the value you're producing for the customer. The internal metrics are a whole other conversation. There are 8 key components of a successful execution plan. Number 1, and I've emphasized number 1 whenever I'm talking about projects, is what is your definition of success for that customer? The reason why this is so important, because that's why the project exists. That's the inception of the project. Your primary customer, you might have lots of stakeholders, but your primary customer, the person who is going to declare satisfaction for the project, who is not necessarily your boss, it could be, but it's not necessarily. It could be another customer internally within the company. It could be a head of product development outside of the engineering organization or outside of the drug development organization, but it is somebody who is responsible for the revenue numbers associated with a product line more than likely, and they are your primary customer. They're the ones who are going to declare success, and they're going to tie value metrics to the work that you have done. If you don't have a good understanding of what those value metrics are, who that person is, how they're going to declare success, what success means for them, you're setting yourself up for failure before you've even started your project. The scope statement is a really simple what's in, what's out, but the problem with the scope statement, as anyone who's done any level of product development or project management over the years recognizes, is scope is a bit of a squishy thing. It moves, it changes, it shifts. One of the things that I work with teams on is, as we build an execution layer, what we're looking to do is we're looking to be able to build serious agility into our ability to be able to deliver value and still be able to manage conversations around features, functionality, scope, breadth, delivery, all of those things. In the environments that we work in today, those conversations are becoming more and more sophisticated, requiring more and more agility and more sophistication in terms of having the conversations as well. The complexity that we're facing today in terms of delivering any kind of project, particularly as we start incorporating AI, both as a tool to help us do the delivery and as a potential agent on our team, we're putting ourselves in a position where that complexity is just expanding significantly. As we do that, our scope statement becomes an ideal. It's not necessarily what will eventually get delivered. If we can accept that, rather than take the scope statement and have it be something that we beat our customers with over the head, which we used to do in the past, I will confess to that, what we would do is we would try and get the customer to adhere to the scope statement. I think as they say, that horse has left the barn. I think that we're in a situation now where we really need to be able to understand how we can be agile around our scope and how we can co-design, co-invent, negotiate what the real conditions of satisfaction are going to be when it comes to scope definition. Schedules and milestones are another part of project execution, and that usually comes with dependencies. I've worked on multiple different projects where we have schedules and milestones for individual silos or individual teams, and we have broad ones for the overall project, but we haven't necessarily looked at the impact of all of the scope and the milestones for each silo or each team within the organization and how they really come together in terms of commitments that people are making to each other that allow for that level of cross-functional collaboration. The resource plan, people, budget, equipment, right? That's the absolute basics in there. The resource plan to me is something that allows us to be able to say how many seats we have available to help us do the work, but it is a million miles from understanding the execution capability of the people in those seats. So building shared understanding, building common language, building shared standards, building shared metrics, that is a process that takes time and it takes practice and it takes experience. And if you have a mature team, then your understanding of your resource is going to be pretty accurate. If you have a newly assembled team or you're new to the team, spending a significant amount of time really understanding your resources and their capabilities will serve you really well down the road. Risk management plan in terms of identification, mitigation and contingency. So I've done multiple videos on technical debt and on development debt in the pharma and biosciences space. Your risk mitigation plan needs to include an understanding of your technical debt. There are many other aspects of risk that you're going to have to get a handle on. But as you start looking at your risk plan, start at least understanding what your risks are, beginning to define them, beginning to quantify them, and beginning to understand the impact, the domino effect of some of those risks on the overall success of the project. The communication plan. I'm a little hesitant about communication plans. You absolutely need one. There's a basic communication plan. You need to let people know what's going on. But I think that we can use the communication as a crutch rather than having some of the difficult conversations or rather than having some of the awkward conversations that we know need to be had as part of the project. One of the things that I look to help teams do is really up their game on their ability to be able to have conversations around breakdowns, conversations around delays, conversations around tech debt, conversations around changes in scope, conversations around breakdowns between the different functions in the team or the different teams across the project organization. And those conversations, the ability to be able to have those, shouldn't be brushed in under a comms plan, because we tend to think of when we have breakdowns in those areas, we put it under the umbrella of comms, we call it communications, and we say we have a communications breakdown. I would look at it differently and say that we actually have an execution layer breakdown, and that there is a way to address that, and there are metrics associated with it, and we can handle it much more proactively and much more effectively if we see it as a practice that we need to incorporate into our team and into each member of our team. The change control process. This is a very important process, but it's also a very difficult process, because this is where you're having the conversations with your customers about scope. So that can be a process for managing the paperwork. Make sure you don't let it just be that. Make sure that you understand that that is actually a critical part of the execution layer of the project, because it sets the project up for success or failure. And it sets the project up because you're building a level of trust with the external customers. If you don't see yourself as the project lead, as the lead person who is building that trust with the customer base, be they internal or external, or be they in a whole other department where you're doing a handoff because you're part of the product development process, then make sure that as you think about the change control process, that those are conversations, that they are not movement of paperwork. Paperwork needs to follow for sure, and it's useful to document things, of course, but much, much more importantly is the level of trust and the level of negotiation and co-design and co-invention that you can do with a strongly allied and aligned customer base that will have a domino effect across the level of trust and the potential success of the project for the entirety of the project. project. I've talked about the execution layer in this video and in other videos. When I think about best practices in terms of your project execution plan, I would say that your best practices look like an assessment of the level of trust that I'm building with a customer, and that is an assessment. There isn't a really powerful way to quantify that. One of the ways that we have come close to quantifying that is to look at the number of breakdowns that we have had with the customer and the number that are outstanding and the number that have been handled. So if we have complete conversations, and again, I talk about this in other videos, but if we have complete conversations that are focused around building trust and delivering success and value for the customer, then what we can do is we can begin to look at where are those in breakdown, where are those conversations successful, and whether or not we have a higher number of breakdowns than we actually have of closed successful conversations. If you're building trust over the course of the project, this number will go higher, the closed successful conversations. If you're losing trust over the duration of the project, this number will begin to go higher. So that is a very careful kind of watch note for you that you can begin to think about in terms of, am I building this project in an environment of trust that is focused on value for the customer and deeply aligned with our shared definition of success? The other thing to look at is the number of breakdowns that you have within the project itself. So your team, if they begin treating each other like customers and performers inside the conversation, inside the project, what you'll find is there's a similar level of trust conversations with completed conversations where the loop gets closed and the customer declares success, to conversations that are kind of hanging out there. And they might show up as breakdowns between different teams. They might show up as the siloing of the organization. They might show up as backlogs, little mini backlog logs between different teams, as opposed to the backlog log for the whole project. And so what you'll see is you'll see a gradual degradation of project coherence over time if you're not paying attention to the execution layer, which I consider to be absolutely critical for a project success. If you're interested in understanding how to really drive effective execution within your project, then I have a white paper that I think might be very valuable for you. It's called Execution by Design. There's a link to it below in the comments. There's also a link to it on my website. It's under the free material on my website. And it is Execution by Design, Unlocking the Invisible Layer of Project Success. As you learn how to observe the execution layer in your projects and manage it proactively, I'm here to support you. I'd love to know what it is you think about this video, what you think about the white paper. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe, join in the conversation. Let me know whether or not it's valuable for you. And I'm here to support you in your project success. I wish you the best of luck.